for the Susan Taylor Podcast, where we discuss the yoga of mind, medicine, and healing. Author of Feeling Good Matters, Sexual Radiance, and the Vital Energy Program, Dr. Taylor imparts authentic knowledge and practical tools that inspire, educate, and empower us to be a healing force for positive change. So join us and take your life and our planet to the next level.
Hello and welcome to episode 22. How much food is enough? In other words, how much do we need to eat to stay vital? The last two podcasts we spoke about the timing of eating and the quality of food and in relation to our level of vitality. Well, today I'd like to discuss how much food do we really need to eat to be vital and healthy, supporting our digestive health. How many times have you said to yourself, "Stop eating, you don't need to eat anymore"? How easy it is for us to get up the morning after a late night meal, and how long did it take for you to realize that eating a full meal before a mental task inhibits our ability to focus and concentrate? These are the type of questions that we ask ourselves over and over again as we continue one more time. I needed to stop eating early. It's happened to all of us. They're obvious questions with obvious answers pointing to one conclusion. Too much food and having a clear and sharp mind are antithetical. When I work with clients, it's pretty easy to work with the time and quality of food. In fact, that's usually where we end up, working with the timing of eating and the quality of food, as you just heard in the last two podcasts. I always save the quantity of food to the end because quantity and how much we eat is really rooted not only into our individual biological needs, but also one's emotional makeup. How much is enough? How much do we really need to be satisfied? Are we satisfying the hunger of the body, or is the hunger of the body really related to the hunger of the mind? And also, you really need to know, are the nutrients being assimilated enough so that hunger does subside? Because it's really two things that we're looking at. The physical aspect as well as the subtle aspect of food. And again, as a biochemist in training, I also know that there is a biochemical involvement on satiety as well as an emotional involvement. And working with both is stellar. It's the best approach to take. We work with both and we get the results that we want when we're relating to vitality of mind and body. Remember, the mind and body are one. I'll emphasize that over and over again. When we eat too much, we directly interfere with our energy flow and thus our mind becomes dull and stupefied. Excess eating causes loss of vitality and dulls our awareness. It blunts our alertness and produces fatigue. Have you ever felt vital after consuming a full-course main meal? Eating too much makes it hard getting up from the table, as a matter of fact. And we always want that last bite. Sometimes we overeat, even though on some level we know we would enjoy the food more if we continued to eat in moderation rather than excess. We all know that excess food doesn't translate into additional nutrients, yet sometimes we still eat to excess. That fifth bite of chocolate cake tastes no different from the first, yet we shove it into our mouths. I'm speaking about myself, everyone. I don't know if that's happened to you, but I'll always speak from my own experience so that please don't feel that we're all out there alone in this. It's a human tendency to do that at times. Actually, we do tend to overeat foods that aren't nourishing for our brain and for our digestive systems. Generally find non-nourishing food nutritionally unsatisfying. It's just the way it is, as well as deficient in what we need to be optimal with metabolic function, as far as metabolic function relate to the body and metabolism of the mind. So paradoxically, we crave more when we eat foods that are deficient in the nutrients as well as the satisfaction from lacking taste, for example. By overeating, we put a strain not only on our digestive system, but we can't accommodate the plethora of food but on our brain, nervous system, and consciousness as well. So it's not only on the brain that we can accommodate that amount of food, the plethora of food, as I just mentioned, but our brain, nervous system, and consciousness just can't we can't wrap ourselves around it and take all of that in. Trying to operate on any level, physically, creatively, when we're creative, emotionally, intellectually, is far more difficult if the body is trying to figure out what to do with the food that we've just taken in. On the other side of the coin, at the same time, I don't recommend undereating either, for it leads us to a decrease in optimal brain capacity. By undereating, I mean not getting enough nutrients for proper brain function, as well as habitually skipping a freshly prepared meal. Again, over and over again, I say, if there's one thing you're going to do, make one freshly prepared meal a day. And if you're not going to make it, maybe there's some divine presence that will make it for you, and you might even have to go to a very good restaurant for that, because we do need to have a freshly prepared meal a day if we're going to have proper brain function. And again, we're talking proper mind function also. Something that's freshly prepared will translate differently in the body than something that is just a box that you put into a microwave or just heat up on the oven. You'll have, even if you have the same micronutrients, as I said in the last podcast, and macronutrients, you're going to be missing a subtle essence that actually feeds all aspects of your human organism. It's not the same when I talk about undereating as cutting down calories, or because sometimes cutting down calories can actually increase lifespan if it's done skillfully. Too much restriction, however, of course, will decrease lifespan and decrease our life force and our happiness, actually. I'm talking about skipping meals and drinking diet soda or coffee in between to curb appetite that takes the place of the meal instead of sitting down. Remember, eating meals and sitting down is also something about relationship with others, or relationship with the food itself. It's much more satisfying sitting down and enjoying and having a relationship with food first, but then also a relationship with others. Sharing meals with others is far more nourishing than eating at your desk or at your cubicle on the fly like everyone does. Everything is so fast-paced that we're losing perspective of that relationship that we have with food, and therefore quantity is not even taken into consideration. As you can see, when we starve our brains on a regular basis in an attempt to stay thin, we're actually causing stress on our system. Or if we're starving our brains on a regular basis because we're skipping meals, forget about staying thin, but just because we're always in a hurry, we're going to see an effect on our system. Dieting by skipping meals, or skipping meals because we're in a hurry, is one of the most hazardous threats to our brain's vitality. Or following up pop culture diets developed from a fundamental approach, we're also going to be starving our brains. These popular diets that pop up, everyone gets on that bandwagon for a while, but we're not really looking at feeding our whole organism. We're looking at just micronutrients, perhaps organic, perhaps things that people are talking about, feeding the gut microbiota. Yes, we can feed the microbiota on a mechanical basis, on a chemical basis, but also we need to do subtle energy here. What we strive for, again, is balance. As an organism, we're always striving for homeostasis or balance, a tuning of the brain and mind so that we can become consciously aware, living in the moment, consciously aware of the process, consciously aware of feeling vital and alive at full capacity for playing, thinking, feeling, and even thriving. Could you imagine thriving? We must take into consideration the quantity of food, the quality of food, the timing, and all the things that we've been speaking about. Take time to keep a journal to help you keep track of your food intake and your state of balance. You'll be able to see it if you write it down for a few weeks. Some people even do it for months. I suggest don't get too caught up in that, because then your focus just becomes on the mechanics of it. But do it enough so that you could learn create your own awareness of what you're doing. Here are some pointers that I came up with that I found useful to keep your quantity under control when you're choosing food. Quantity under control is very, very important. And as I said, it's the last part of the nutrition training that I do with people in master training courses. We work with timing, we work with quality, but then we work with quantity. And you have to graduate the other two to really get to quantity because it requires all of that in the fundamental formula for that. So here they are, some of the pointers. Don't wait until you're starving to eat. We all know that. And if you are starving, getting ready to eat, have some diluted fruit juice. I like to use the grape juice. It's closest to the brain glucose. Just have something diluted just so you have a few minutes so the brain can equilibrate its glucose before you start diving into anything that you don't want to be diving into. Avoid extreme fundamental practices of deprivation. As I mentioned, again, use diluted grapefruit juice to establish your blood sugar level of your brain. I used to have clients who would finish a day's work and they wanted to munch on their way home in the car. And I had them prepare their water bottle with maybe 1/3 of the grape juice, pure grape juice with no preservatives, and then put a little bit or the other 2/3 of water and just sip on it at room temperature as you're coming home. So you just don't go home and raid the refrigerator or stop through a drive-through on your way home. Eat room temperature and warm foods rather than iced foods so that you can actually produce more satiety. Cooked moist foods are better with proper seasoning than dry foods. They cause satiety to be, it's much easier to be satiated and satisfied with cooked, warm, moist foods. Remove yourself from the table after eating. It's very tempted to sit there and keep filling your plate or munching on something that may be on the table. So pick yourself up, remove, and go for a walk if you need to. Don't eat while doing other tasks. And create the mindset of nourishing your organism, not filling up a void. That requires real conscious eating, remaining calm, right? Consciously aware, living in the moment. By creating that kind of mindset of nourishing your organism, you'll learn, what am I really filling up here and how much do I really need? Again, keep in mind, these are very advanced practices because they require that your whole organism is in tuned and aware and focused enough to start paying attention to this. Keep in mind again that balance is the key. We constantly strive for homeostasis. Learn to pay attention to your inner cues before diving into the box of cookies or overfilling your plate. I tend to say cookies because I spent years diving into that box of cookies, even though they were organic and they were made with the proper wheat or not wheat, gluten-free. They still were an overabundance of sugar and carbohydrates for my poor brain. So working with this, not overfilling your plate, is what I call a food sadhana, a food practice. You get to really see your own habits, how your own mind is working. Working with these habits has a profound influence on the training of your mind. And we'll get more into this later on in our podcasts and blogs and courses, how we can actually work with the habits of eating and influence the training of our own mind. Well, that brings me to the end of this episode. And again, if you'd like to be notified weekly for new podcasts, please subscribe. The Susan Taylor Podcast is available on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And also susantaylor.org, where you can actually click on the podcast to subscribe. And contact me with any questions, with comments, or feedback. You can just go to susantaylor.org and give us the questions, comments, or feedbacks. And we'll listen to that, whatever you need. And again, thank you for listening. And until next time, remain calm, consciously aware, living in the moment, and apply that to your food, and you will hit a home run. See you next time.